grace and light.
What if everything you've been told about the devil is wrong? The greatest lie ever told is that the devil was created as evil. No, he was created perfect, the brightest, the closest, the most beautiful. And what destroyed him was not darkness, but something far more dangerous. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you may realize that his story is also yours. Close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine the darkest, most terrifying entity in the entire universe. The source of every cry of anguish, every blood-soaked war, every horrifying disease, and every tear that has ever fallen upon this desolate world. We call him Satan, the devil, the ancient serpent carrying the seed of destruction. But what if I told you a theological truth so profound, it could shatter everything you thought you knew? That God, the all-perfect, all-good creator, never created a single demon. Not one dark force was ever shaped by his hand. The truth hidden within ancient scrolls reveals something far more tragic. The greatest monster in the universe was once the most perfect masterpiece heaven had ever known. The greatest lie is believing that evil was born evil. No, the deepest darkness was born from the brightest light. Welcome to Grace and Light. If this is your first time stepping into this journey, exploring the hidden and unsettling depths of the spiritual world with us, make sure to subscribe now. Your support is the fire that fuels us to keep uncovering these untold theological perspectives. And now, hold on to your mind, because what you're about to hear will force you to rethink the very line between glory and damnation. Before time ever began its first tick, before space stretched itself into endless galaxies, before the first particles of the universe ever took form, there was only the eternal presence of God. In the absolute stillness of the divine realm, the Creator brought forth a holy kingdom known as heaven. He did not use dust or matter. He used his own radiant glory and power to ignite life into countless angels. Among billions of pure beings created to share in his love, there was one who stood above them all. God did not merely create an angel. He poured the very essence of perfection into a singular, unmatched masterpiece. His name was Lucifer. Today, that name echoes like a cry of rage from hell itself. But in the beginning, in Latin, Lucifer meant the light bearer. In ancient Hebrew, he was Hallel, the morning star, the brightest light of dawn. Every time we turn to the words of the prophet Ezekiel, there is something haunting, almost sorrowful, about how this archangel is described. God adorned him with garments woven from the most radiant precious stones. He was the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. He stood closest to the blazing throne of the Most High. More than a conductor of heavenly music, Lucifer himself seemed to be music. Every movement, every pulse of his being resonated with divine melodies, filling heaven with the most glorious symphony ever known. So how does a being standing at the very peak of perfection tear open the heavens of grace and cast himself into the abyss? The answer does not lie in some arbitrary punishment, but in the greatest gift God ever gave, a gift both beautiful and devastating, free will. To understand this is to touch the very essence of love itself. True love can never be forced. If angels were merely programmed beings, machines designed to bow and worship, then their praise would be empty noise. For love to be real, for devotion to be meaningful, there must be a choice to bow in love or to turn away in rebellion. God, in his infinite wisdom, accepted the most painful risk of all. He placed into Lucifer's hands the key to free will, allowing him the power to determine his own destiny. That freedom was the only gateway to the highest form of love. But it was also a volcano, waiting to erupt into betrayal. And right there, at that fragile boundary of absolute freedom, the seed of the greatest tragedy in the history of the universe was planted. At that fragile boundary of absolute freedom, the seed of the greatest tragedy in the history of the universe began to take root, when the gaze of the morning star no longer turned toward the Creator, but slowly turned inward to admire his own beauty. The downfall of a great angel does not happen in an instant. It does not begin with a sudden outburst or an open rebellion. It is a slow decay, silent, subtle, and deeply internal. When we reflect on the passage from the book of Isaiah describing Lucifer's downfall, we do not see a roaring monster thirsting for blood. Instead, we see a perfect being slowly poisoning himself with a toxin known as the self. The very light that God had given him began to cloud his judgment. Lucifer forgot a fundamental truth. He was radiant, but he was not the sun. He was only the moon, reflecting the glory of the Most High. His perfect beauty, his extraordinary intelligence, his privileged position near the eternal throne, all of it began to whisper dangerous illusions into his mind. Illusions of self-sufficiency, of self-glory. It is tragically ironic that perfection itself became his greatest weakness. From that seed of pride emerged 5 declarations that shook eternity itself. I will ascend above the clouds. I will set my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will rise above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Notice the word I. No longer submission, no longer praise directed toward the loving Father. The symphony of heaven, once a harmony of selfless love, was now pierced by a single discordant note. Lucifer's rebellion was not simply a desire to leave God. He wanted to replace him. He wanted the crown. He wanted dominion. He wanted all creation to bow before him. But God is the source of all life, all truth, all love. To reject God is to sever the very lifeline of existence itself. Evil is not a substance that was created. Evil is the absence of good, just as darkness is the absence of light. The moment Lucifer chose to become his own source of light, he became a void, a bottomless abyss. Yet the tragedy did not end with a single fallen being. A mind as brilliant as Lucifer's understood one thing clearly. To overthrow divine order, he would need an army. With cunning words and persuasive deception, he began planting seeds of doubt into the minds of other angels. He spoke of a false freedom, a world where they would bow to no one, where they could become gods themselves. For the first time in heaven, concepts like division and manipulation began to exist. The most dangerous lie is always wrapped in a fragment of truth, and Lucifer succeeded. He convinced 1/3 of the stars of heaven, countless powerful angels, to betray the one who gave them life. The perfect peace of heaven was shattered. Dark clouds of hatred gathered, and the inevitable collision drew near. The silence of eternity was broken, and the first echo of a cosmic catastrophe began to resound, a spiritual earthquake that would forever change the destiny of the universe. When whispers of betrayal turned into roaring cries of defiance, heaven, once filled only with songs of peace, was forced for the very first time to witness something utterly foreign: war. Forget the naive images of angels wielding swords of iron, riding clouds and clashing in physical combat. The war in heaven was far greater, far more violent, and far more abstract than anything the human mind can comprehend. It was a collision between truth and deception, between loving obedience and the madness of domination. In that suffocating tension, God did not directly intervene to crush the rebellion. His wisdom revealed something deeper. He allowed justice to be carried out by those who remained faithful. The archangel Michael stepped forward. His name itself was not merely a title, but a declaration. Who is like God? It was not a question. It was a challenge. A sharp and piercing strike against Lucifer's delusion of becoming equal to the Most High. Led by Michael, the army of light advanced, clashing against 1/3 of heaven's fallen angels, now united under the command of the ancient dragon. Both sides wielded unimaginable power, forces capable of tearing apart dimensions themselves. Yet the strength of violence and deception could never overcome the unshakable foundation of eternal truth. This war may have stretched across countless ages, beyond the limits of human time, but its outcome was sealed the very moment the first note of rebellion was sounded. Lucifer, no matter how magnificent, was still a created being. Bound by the limits of existence, how could he ever overcome the will of the infinite? In the decisive moment, the radiant power of the Creator was unleashed through his faithful army, and the rebellion was utterly crushed. It was the most tragic and the most magnificent moment in the history of the divine realm. The New Testament captures this moment through the words of Jesus. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. That single image carries an unbearable weight of sorrow. The morning star, once the brightest light in heaven, was stripped of every title, every grace, every trace of glory. Along with countless followers, he was cast out of eternity, plunging downward through layers of space and time, falling with the speed of lightning cutting across a darkened sky. But this fall was not merely a change in location. It was a horrific transformation of being. Separated from the one true source of light, Lucifer's radiant garments turned to ash. His beauty twisted into something grotesque. His brilliant mind decayed into cunning and malice. The name Lucifer, the light bearer, was replaced by a new identity of eternal disgrace. Satan, the adversary, the accuser, the devil, the divider. The angels who followed him lost their wings of holiness, becoming restless spirits, wandering in endless hatred. They chose freedom without God, and God granted them exactly what they desired, a realm completely void of grace, of love, of his presence. The war in heaven had ended, the skies were purified, but for the fragile material world forming below, the greatest nightmare had only just begun. Stripped of all glory, banished from the divine presence, the once radiant bearer of light now descended into a silent abyss, a void so deep, so empty, that even echoes refused to exist. There, in that suffocating darkness, the being who once stood closest to the throne of God began to reshape his existence, not into a king, but into a prisoner trapped within the consequences of his own rebellion. For centuries, humanity has imagined hell as a blazing inferno, a place of fire, torture, and monstrous creatures wielding weapons. But the deeper theological truth is far more haunting and far more tragic. Hell is not a chamber of punishment designed to satisfy divine wrath. It is a state of being, a dimension completely cut off from the presence of God. No light, no love, no grace, only the unbearable weight of eternal separation. The fire of hell is not merely physical. It is the invisible burning of regret, emptiness, and an unending thirst for a presence that will never return. And Satan, contrary to human imagination, does not rule hell as a mighty king. He is its most miserable inhabitant, the greatest victim of his own pride. Yet even in that endless void, his hatred did not fade. It grew, it burned, it intensified, because he realized a truth more painful than any torment. He could never harm God. Not once. Not ever. No force, no rebellion, no strategy could ever reach the eternal throne. But if you cannot strike the Father, then you destroy what the Father loves most. And so from the depths of darkness, Satan turned his gaze toward a new creation, small, fragile, yet infinitely significant, Earth. When God formed humanity from the dust of the ground, he did something he had never done for angels. He breathed his own life into them. Humans were made in his image. They were given authority, purpose, and intimacy with the Creator himself. They walked with him in the Garden of Eden, in the golden stillness of every evening. To Satan, this was unbearable. How could creatures formed from dust receive such love, such closeness, such honor? The jealousy within him twisted into something darker, a calculated, merciless plan. He would not attack with force, because he knew God would protect them. Instead, he chose the same weapon that had destroyed him, deception and free will. He took the form of a serpent, the most subtle and cunning creature in the garden. He did not force Eve. He did not command. He did not threaten. He whispered. Did God really say that? With that single question, he planted doubt into a heart that had never known it. Then came the lie, the same lie that had consumed him. You will be like God. It was the same poison, the same illusion, the same path to destruction. And when Eve reached out, when her hand touched the fruit, when her teeth broke its surface, the universe itself trembled. It was not just a bite, it was a rupture, a spiritual explosion that shattered the connection between heaven and earth. Sin entered, suffering followed, death began its reign. The perfect world was broken, and in the shadows, Satan watched. Not as a victor, but as a being desperate to prove that if he had fallen, everything else must fall with him. And yet, no matter how vast the web of deception may be, no matter how many shadows stretch across the earth, the power of the enemy, from the very beginning to the very end, has always been nothing more than a tragic illusion. For thousands of years, humanity has been trapped in a deeply flawed belief, the idea that the universe is a battlefield between two equal forces. God, representing good, and Satan, representing evil. But that is the greatest lie ever whispered into the human mind. Satan has never been, and will never be, an equal opponent to God. If the Creator is an infinite ocean of existence, then Satan is nothing more than a corrupted drop floating in emptiness. Every storm he unleashes, every war he ignites, every shadow he casts across human history exists only within the boundaries of what the Most High allows. There is no chaos outside divine sovereignty, no rebellion beyond divine awareness, no darkness that escapes the reach of eternal light. The great theologian Martin Luther once said, "Even the devil is God's devil." Satan believes he is disrupting God's plan, but he does not realize that even humanity's fall has already been woven into a far greater design of redemption. He believed he had won when the Son of God was nailed to the cross. But in that very moment, the blood that flowed became the verdict, the final sentence against him. The cross was not defeat. It was the beginning of the end. From that moment forward, Satan became nothing more than a wounded creature struck by a fatal blow, thrashing violently as he drags as many souls as possible into darkness before his time runs out. But his fate has already been written. The book of Revelation unveils what awaits the deceiver at the end of time. There will be no negotiations, no second chances, no escape. The ancient serpent, the dragon, the deceiver of nations, will be cast into the lake of fire and sulfur, a place not of petty revenge, but of absolute justice. There he will face the full weight of everything he has unleashed forever, and his kingdom of darkness will collapse into nothingness. Not because God seeks vengeance, but because purity demands that corruption must be removed, so that a new creation, a new heaven, and a new earth may rise, unstained, unbroken, eternal. When we look back at the rise and fall of the morning star, we do not just see a story about a fallen angel. We see a mirror, a warning. Because the most dangerous path into darkness does not belong to the weak nor the ignorant. It belongs to those who stand at the highest peak of beauty, of intelligence, of power, and forget the source of everything they have been given. The tragedy of Lucifer teaches us one eternal truth. Light was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be reflected. And the moment we try to become the center of the universe is the moment we begin to fall. And in the end, there is only one truth that remains unshaken. Light will always overcome darkness. The journey from the radiant morning star to the ruler of a bottomless abyss is not just a distant theological story. It is a mirror reflecting the deepest tragedy of pride and the misuse of free will. Lucifer's fall reveals a shocking truth. Evil was not born from some primordial darkness. It was born from the brightest place in heaven, when a perfect being chose to place himself at the center of existence, instead of surrendering to the one who created him. The war in heaven, the descent into the abyss, and the calculated corruption of humanity in the Garden of Eden were all desperate attempts of a being who had lost the true source of life. And yet, no matter how complex the deception, no matter how powerful the illusion may seem, Satan's authority has always been limited, fully contained within the sovereignty of the Most High. His fall and his inevitable end in the eternal fire declare one unshakable truth. No force in existence can ever break the order, the justice, and the eternal love of God. In the end, truth will rise, light will prevail, and all darkness will be undone. Deep lessons and how to apply them in life. The greatest lesson from Lucifer's tragedy is the destructive power of pride. The most dangerous weakness within us is not our flaws, not our limitations, but the moment we stand at the peak of success, of intelligence, of power, and begin to believe that everything comes from ourselves. That is where the fall begins. In our daily lives, this lesson becomes a compass. When you achieve success, when you gain recognition, when you accumulate wealth, pause. Remember this. Your intelligence, your opportunities, your strength are not purely self-created. They are gifts. And the moment you begin to see them that way, you transform. Instead of becoming arrogant, you become grounded. Instead of dominating others, you begin to serve them. Instead of isolating yourself, you create connection. True greatness is not measured by how high you rise, but by how deeply you remain rooted in humility. Humility is not weakness. It is an anchor, the only force strong enough to keep your soul from drifting into the abyss of ego. So in your journey, choose gratitude, choose awareness, choose humility. Because the same light that can elevate you can also destroy you if you try to make it your own. And so, the final question remains. When success comes, when power grows, when the world begins to recognize you, will you reflect the light, or will you try to become it?